I went downstairs for water while my mother was dying upstairs. Then I heard my father whisper, "She can't know." My mother's best friend said, "Then keep quiet." I turned the corner and saw why. So I swallowed my scream. That night changed the way I understood family. Before then, I kept telling myself I was just tired. Grief makes everything feel suspicious. Exhaustion turns shadows into threats. I was 21, barely holding my own life together, and I had moved back home because my mother, Nancy, was fading in front of us. There was no dramatic family meeting. No moment where everyone sat down and decided I would become the responsible one. It just happened. One week I was worrying about school, laundry, deadlines, and cheap takeout. The next, I was back in my childhood home, learning how to measure medication, watch her breathing, and listen for the small changes that meant pain was coming. The house stopped feeling like a house. The upstairs bedroom became the center of everything. The curtains stayed half-closed because bright light hurt my mother's eyes. Bottles lined the nightstand. Towels were stacked near the bed. A chair sat beside her pillow where I slept more than I actually sat. The quiet hum of medical equipment filled every silence until I forgot what silence used to sound like. My mother tried to make it easier on me. Even near the end, she still worried about everyone else. "Did you eat?" she would whisper. I would lie and say, "Yeah, Mom. I'm fine." She always knew when I was lying. She was just too tired to argue. My father, Stephen, didn't know what to do with himself. At first, I felt sorry for him. He and my mother had been together for most of their adult lives. In our family, they were treated like proof that real love existed. They had old jokes nobody else understood. They held hands without thinking. They knew each other's moods from across a room. But when my mother got worse, he didn't become softer. He didn't become stronger. He disappeared while still living under the same roof. He came home, stood in her doorway for a few seconds, then left before she could ask him to sit down. Sometimes he went straight to the garage and stayed there for hours. Sometimes I found him in the kitchen staring at nothing, like he was waiting for someone else to tell him what kind of man he was supposed to be. I wanted to be angry at him. Most days, I was too tired. I was the one changing sheets. I was the one helping Mom drink water through a straw. I was the one calling the hospice nurse when her pain got worse. I was the one sitting beside her at 2 in the morning while she whispered that she was scared. Then Melissa came. Melissa was my mother's best friend. She had been around my whole life. She was in old photos, family parties, birthday videos, and holiday dinners. She knew where we kept the extra plates. She knew which mug my mother loved. She knew the stories behind nearly every framed picture on our walls. So when she showed up with a small suitcase and said, "You shouldn't have to do this alone," I nearly broke down from relief. At first, she helped. She cooked real meals when I was living on crackers and coffee. She picked up groceries. She answered the phone when relatives called and I didn't have the strength to repeat the same updates again. She sat with my mother, brushed her hair, and spoke to her in the soft voice people use when they're trying not to cry. She also sat with my father. That seemed like a blessing at first. My father had been trapped in his grief, and Melissa knew how to reach him in a way I couldn't. She would go out to the garage and talk to him. Sometimes they stayed there for an hour. Sometimes they barely spoke. One night, after she came back inside, I said, "Thank you for checking on him." She looked exhausted and said, "He's breaking, Sarah. Someone has to keep him from falling apart." I believed her. I needed to believe her. For a short while, things felt almost manageable. Not good. Nothing was good. But there were warm meals on the counter. The laundry got folded. My father came back inside more often. Then I started noticing things I didn't want to notice. My father smiled at Melissa in a way he had stopped smiling at my mother. Melissa touched his arm too often. Not quickly. Not casually. Slowly, like she had a right to. Their voices changed when I entered a room. One night, I came downstairs to rinse out a cup and saw them through the kitchen window. They were sitting on the back porch in the dark, too close together. Melissa had a blanket over her shoulders, and my father was leaning toward her like she was the only warm thing left in the world. I froze by the sink. Then Melissa laughed softly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even happy. But it was wrong. My mother was upstairs, weak and half asleep, and her best friend was downstairs making my father laugh, like he had forgotten where he was. I told myself I was being unfair. People needed comfort. People survived grief in strange ways. That was what I kept repeating in my head. But the feeling didn't go away. My mother had one clear afternoon not long after that. She was awake, really awake, and asked me to brush her hair. Her voice was thin, but her mind was there. Melissa came in with soup and smiled. "You look beautiful today," she said. My mother gave a tiny laugh. "You're lying." "Always," Melissa said, and kissed her forehead. It should have been sweet. Then Melissa looked toward the doorway. My father was standing there. The look between them lasted less than a second, but I saw it. It was private. It was secret. It was not the look of two people helping a woman they both loved. That night, I barely slept. I sat beside my mother's bed, listening to her breathing and the small sounds of the house below us. Around midnight, my throat was dry and my head was pounding. I didn't want to leave her room, but I needed water. So I went downstairs. I didn't turn on the lights because I knew the house by memory. The hallway was dark. The kitchen had a little moonlight coming through the window. That was when I heard my father's voice. Low. Shaking. "She can't know." I stopped. Melissa answered, "Then keep quiet." I stepped closer, my heart dropping before I even saw them. Then I turned the corner. They were pressed close against the kitchen counter. Not comforting each other. Not sharing some innocent moment of grief. My father had his hands in Melissa's hair. Melissa's arms were around his neck. Their faces were so close that, for one awful second, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. Then Melissa saw me. She pulled away first. My father turned, and the expression on his face told me everything before he spoke. Fear. Not guilt. Not regret. Fear. Because he knew I knew. I couldn't speak at first. My whole body felt cold. My hands shook so badly I had to grab the back of a chair. I looked at him and said, "How could you?" My voice barely came out. Melissa stared at the floor. She smoothed down her sweater like that mattered, like being neat could make what I saw less ugly. "Sarah," my father started. "No," I said. "Don't." He took one step toward me, and I moved back so fast the chair scraped the floor. "She is upstairs," I said. "Mom is upstairs." Melissa flinched, but she still didn't say anything. That made it worse. I wanted her to apologize. I wanted her to defend herself. I wanted her to look me in the eye and admit she had betrayed the woman who trusted her. Instead, she whispered, "I'm going to my room." Then she walked past me. Just like that. Her door clicked shut down the hall, and my father sat at the kitchen table like his legs had given out. He covered his face with both hands and started crying. For 1 second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then he looked up and said the words that ruined whatever was left between us. "Please don't tell your mother." I stared at him. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please," he said. "She can't handle it." "You know she can't. If she finds out, it will destroy her." "You already did that," I said. He shook his head. "No, it isn't like that." "What is it like?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I'm losing my wife," he said. "I am watching the woman I love disappear in front of me. I am not strong enough for this, Sarah. Melissa understands. She's the only person who makes me feel like I'm not drowning." I let out one empty laugh. Not because anything was funny. Because his excuse was so awful my body didn't know what else to do. "So you're drowning," I said, "and your answer is to betray Mom with her best friend?" His face twisted. It was a mistake. "How long?" He didn't answer. That silence told me enough. I pressed both hands against my mouth because I thought I might be sick. He stood and lowered his voice. "Your mother deserves peace. Please, let her have peace. Don't make her last days about this." That was the trap. He made silence sound like kindness. He made the truth sound cruel. He made me feel like I would be responsible for hurting her if I said anything. That was the part one hated most. Not only that he betrayed her, he handed me the secret and made it mine too. For the next few weeks, I lived in 2 separate worlds. Upstairs, I was my mother's daughter. I sat beside her bed. I held her hand. I helped her sip water. I smiled when she was awake. Downstairs, I was a witness to something rotten. Melissa still cooked. Still answered the phone. Still called my mother sweetheart. Still leaned over her bed and stroked her hair like she had not crossed a line no friend should ever cross. My father still kissed my mother's forehead. Every time he did, my stomach clenched. I watched my mother look at him with trust, and I wanted to scream. But I didn't. What was I supposed to do? Tell my dying mother that her husband and best friend had betrayed her under her own roof? Let her final days turn into humiliation and heartbreak? Let that be the last truth she carried? I couldn't do it. So I swallowed it. The hospice nurse, Michelle, came by often. She was kind and gentle. She would ask me how I was holding up, and I always said, "I'm okay." One afternoon, she paused by the bedroom door and looked at me carefully. "You don't have to be okay all the time," she said. I almost broke right there. Instead, I nodded and went downstairs to fold towels. The day before my mother died, she woke up clearer than she had been in days. My father sat beside her, looking wrecked. Melissa stood near the dresser, holding a mug of tea she hadn't touched. My mother turned her head toward me and whispered, "Come here." I sat beside her. She touched my cheek with fingers that felt light as paper. "You're a good daughter," she said. I couldn't answer. Then she looked toward my father. "Take care of each other," she whispered. I saw Melissa close her eyes. My father started crying. I could barely breathe. My mother was using the little strength she had left to bless people who had already betrayed her. She passed the next morning. Quietly. No perfect goodbye. No final confession. Just one soft breath that did not become another. Then the house was still. The funeral felt unreal. People hugged me. People cried. People told me my mother had been lucky to have such a devoted family around her. I stood there in black clothes, numb from the inside out, listening to relatives praise Melissa. She was such a good friend. She never left Nancy's side. Your mother was blessed to have her. I wanted to turn around and say, "You have no idea what she did." But I didn't. Melissa cried near the front. My father held her while she did. That image stayed with me more clearly than anything from the service. My mother's best friend weeping into my father's chest while everyone treated it like grief. Maybe part of it was grief. That didn't make it clean. After the funeral, I kept waiting for some sign that my father understood what he had done. I thought maybe once my mother was gone, the shame would hit him. Maybe he would apologize. Maybe he would ask how I was. Maybe he would admit that forcing me to carry his secret had been cruel. He didn't. 3 weeks later, Melissa moved out of the guest room. Into my mother's room. I came home one afternoon and found boxes in the hallway. My mother's sweaters were folded into bags. Her books had been stacked near the door. The curtains she loved were gone. Melissa stood in the bedroom holding a framed photo of my parents from years ago. "Oh," she said when she saw me. "I was just organizing." Organizing. That was the word she used for erasing my mother from her own home. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I said, "You're moving her into this room?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Sarah, don't start. Don't start. Your mother is gone," he said. "We can't leave everything frozen forever." Forever. It had been 3 weeks. That night, I took several of my mother's photo albums and hid them in my room. I had this strange fear that if I didn't save something, Melissa would slowly remove every trace of her until the house looked like my mother had never existed. I wasn't wrong. Over the next month, Melissa changed little things first. Pillows. Curtains. Dishes. Then bigger things. The painting in the hallway. The quilt on the bed. My mother's cookbooks. She didn't remove everything at once. She made it look like cleaning. Like healing. Like moving forward. My father let her. Then the money came. I knew there was a life insurance policy. I knew it was supposed to help with bills, debts, and whatever came after an illness that had already drained us emotionally. I never asked for any of it. I didn't even want to talk about money. But one afternoon, I saw a new SUV in the driveway. Shiny. Expensive. The kind of vehicle Melissa used to admire in parking lots. I stood outside staring at it until my father came out. "Do you like it?" he asked carefully. I turned to him. "Tell me you didn't." His face tightened. Melissa needed a reliable car. With Mom's money? His eyes flashed. That money was left to me. It came because Mom died. He stepped closer. "Watch your tone." Something in me snapped. I had held his secret through my mother's final weeks. I had sat through the funeral. I had watched Melissa move into my mother's bed. I had watched them pretend betrayal was just grief turning into comfort. Now there was a luxury car in the driveway, paid for by the loss of the woman they had humiliated. I said, "You used Mom's death to buy her a prize." His face went red. "That's enough." "No," I said. "It is not enough." He pointed toward the house. "Your mother loved Melissa. That makes it worse." He shook his head like I was the unreasonable one. "You're acting like a child," he said. "Your mother wouldn't want me to be alone." I laughed once, hollow and sharp. She was not even gone a month. His voice rose. "I lost my wife. And I lost my mother," I said. "But you made me lose my father too." That shut him up for a second. Only a second. Then he said, colder this time, "If you can't respect my life, maybe you shouldn't be living under my roof." He said it like a threat. I took it like permission. I went upstairs, packed 2 suitcases, and took the photo albums I had hidden. I didn't take furniture. I didn't take money. I didn't ask for help. Melissa stood in the hallway while I carried my bags down. Sarah, she said softly. Please don't leave like this. I stopped and looked at her. For the first time, I saw fear in her face. Not guilt. Fear of being seen clearly. I said, you were her best friend. Her mouth trembled, but no words came out. My father stood behind her and said nothing. That was his answer. So I left. The next few years were hard in a way I can't make sound pretty. I went back to school. I worked whenever I could. I ate cheap food, slept too little, and avoided family calls because every conversation somehow turned into someone telling me I needed to forgive him. I didn't feel strong. People like to describe walking away as powerful. Sometimes it is. But sometimes walking away means crying in your car because you can't afford groceries until Friday. Sometimes it means missing the father who taught you how to ride a bike, then remembering the man who begged you to protect his secret. I built a life anyway. Slowly. Messily. I met Jason through friends. He was steady in a way that scared me at first. He said what he meant. He apologized when he was wrong. He didn't make love feel like something I had to earn by staying silent. The first time I told him the full story, I expected him to look at me differently. Instead, he said, you were a kid. They should have protected you. I cried harder at that than I expected. Eventually, we got married. We built a small, quiet life. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. Then we had our daughter, Nicole. The first time I held her, something inside me shook. My mother had once held me like that. She had trusted the people around her to love me, and protect her memory. My father had failed both of us. While I was building my life, his was falling apart. I didn't know everything at first because I had cut contact. Pieces came through relatives who loved gossip more than boundaries. Melissa liked money. That was the polite version. The less polite version was that once she had my father fully to herself, she started draining him. Trips. Expensive dinners. House upgrades. New furniture. Gifts he couldn't afford but bought anyway because he seemed terrified of losing her. Then came bigger choices. He used savings he should have protected. He borrowed against the house. He trusted one of Melissa's friends with a business idea that everyone else could see was a bad risk. By the time he realized what was happening, there was barely anything left to save. Then his health declined. I was told he had a serious medical emergency while alone at home. He survived, but he didn't fully recover. His speech changed. His walking changed. He needed more help than he wanted to admit. And Melissa, the woman he had chosen over everyone, left. She packed her things and moved on with Raymond, a man with more money and fewer problems. She took the SUV too. The one bought with my mother's money. That detail should have made me feel satisfied. It didn't. It made me tired. Because none of it brought my mother back. None of it gave me back the years I spent carrying anger like a second spine. None of it made my father apologize. It only proved that betrayal has a cost, even when it arrives late. The call came while I was rocking Nicole to sleep. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved, but something about it felt familiar. When I picked up, I heard my aunt's voice. Sarah? I went still. It was Deborah, my father's sister. We hadn't spoken in years beyond a few stiff messages after my mother died. Hearing her voice pulled me backwards so fast I had to close my eyes. Hi, I said carefully. She took a breath like she had rehearsed this. I know this is unexpected. That meant it was about him. I looked down at Nicole. She was asleep against my chest, one tiny hand curled near her cheek. Deborah said, your father isn't doing well. I didn't answer. He's alone, she continued. He has trouble getting around. His speech is hard to understand sometimes. He's depressed, Sarah. Really depressed. A part of me saw him immediately. Not the man from the kitchen. The dad who carried me on his shoulders. The dad who checked under my bed for monsters. The dad who once drove back to a store because I had left my stuffed animal in a cart. That version of him still lived somewhere in my memory, and I hated that. Deborah softened her voice. He knows about Nicole. My arms tightened around my daughter. He's seen photos, she said. He cries over them. He wants to meet his granddaughter. There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. A request. I said no. Deborah went quiet for a moment. Sarah, please don't answer too quickly. I said no. He made mistakes. Don't call it that. What do you want me to call it? I stood carefully and laid Nicole in her crib. I needed both hands free because my body had started shaking. I want you to call it what it was, I said quietly. He betrayed my mother while she was dying. With her best friend. In her own house. Deborah sighed. I know. No, you don't. I know enough. You know the version that makes him sound sad. Her voice sharpened. He was sad. He was losing his wife. So was I said. I was losing my mother. I didn't betray her. Deborah went silent. Then she said, he wasn't in his right mind. That excuse again. Grief. Pressure. Pain. Darkness. Everyone wanted to make his betrayal sound like something that happened to him instead of something he chose. He was in his right mind when he asked me to keep quiet, I said. Deborah didn't respond. So I kept going. He was in his right mind when Melissa moved into Mom's room. He was in his right mind when he spent Mom's money on her. He was in his right mind when he let me walk out of that house with 2 suitcases and never came after me. That isn't fair, she said. No, I said. What happened to my mother wasn't fair. Her tone changed then. The softness disappeared. Your father has already paid for it. He lost the house. He lost his money. He lost Melissa. He lost his health. How much more punishment do you need? You think this is punishment? What else is it? It's protection. From an old sick man? From a man who uses people when he's lonely. That landed. I could tell because Deborah made a small sound, almost like I had slapped her. He is still your father, she said. And Nicole is my daughter. The room went quiet except for the soft hum of the baby monitor. I said, my job is not to give him comfort. My job is to protect her peace. Deborah's voice cracked. He wants to make things right. Then he can start with an apology. To me. Not through you. Not through cousins. Not by using my daughter as the door back in. He's ashamed. He should be. Maybe that sounds cold. Maybe it is. But I have learned that some people call you cruel when you stop being useful to their guilt. Deborah said, don't carry this into the next generation. That sentence made something inside me go still. Because that was exactly what I was trying not to do. I didn't want Nicole growing up around silence dressed up as forgiveness. I didn't want her learning that family loyalty means swallowing pain so an older man can feel better. I didn't want her used as medicine for wounds my father caused himself. So I said, I'm not carrying it into the next generation. I'm ending it before it reaches her. Then I hung up. I wish that had been the end. It wasn't. By the next morning, my phone was full of messages. Ashley wrote that I was being heartless. Walter said my father might not have much time, and I would regret this forever. Other relatives I barely remembered suddenly had opinions about forgiveness, family, and respect. Not one asked what it was like for me. Not one asked what my mother's final weeks had felt like. Not one asked if my father had ever apologized. They only cared that he was lonely now. Jason found me sitting on the kitchen floor after I had read too many messages in a row. Nicole was napping, and I was trying not to fall apart loudly enough to wake her. He sat beside me. You don't have to answer them, he said. They think I'm a monster. He took my phone gently from my hand and placed it face down. They weren't in that kitchen. I leaned into him and finally let myself cry. Not because I was unsure. Because I was exhausted from defending a boundary that should have been obvious. Later that night, after Nicole was asleep, I stood in her doorway and watched her breathe. Her room was soft and quiet. Small blankets. Stuffed animals. A nightlight glowing near the dresser. For a moment, I imagined my father standing there. Would he cry? Probably. Would part of me break seeing him hold my daughter? Absolutely. That is the part people don't understand. Refusing him doesn't mean I feel nothing. It means I remember everything. I remember my mother's hand in mine. I remember walking out with 2 suitcases while my father stayed behind with the woman who helped destroy us. Maybe he is sorry now. Maybe there is still some piece of the father I loved buried under all the damage he caused. But my daughter is not a reward for late regret. She is not proof that he has been forgiven. She is not a comfort object for a man who only reached for me after everyone else was gone. I don't know what I'll do if he ever contacts me himself. Maybe I'll read the message. Maybe I won't. Maybe one day I'll be ready to hear an apology if he can give one without asking for anything in return. But right now, the answer is no. No visit. No family photo where everyone pretends the past is smaller than it was. My mother died believing she was surrounded by love. I protected that belief because I loved her. But nobody protected me. So now I am protecting my daughter. And if that makes me cold in the eyes of my family, then maybe cold is what I had to become to keep her warm. I'm still not sure if I'm doing the right thing, or if pain has made me harder than I wanted to be. Am I wrong for refusing to let my sick father meet my daughter after what he did to my mother, or is this the one boundary my family has no right to ask me to break?